Hi, I'm Jason Masters. I work as a Johannesburg-based comic book artist. I've wanted to draw comics my whole life. I think it started when I saw, some 2000 ADs back in the day in CNA, Central News Agency. Back in those days, you couldn't really get that many comics, and so you'd get the odd cool, crazy thing in CNA. If it wasn't that, it was Archie Comics, and all the corner cafes. They'd have bizarre things like Devil Dinosaur and radioactive black belt hamsters, craziness like that. And it was for some reason I was just always drawn to that. I mean, I always liked drawing. I grew up wanting to draw as a kid, and I draw at school. And then I saw, hey, people make these stories that I really love, and I can also now maybe I could draw them. I mean, I can sort of draw. So I spent from then on, actually, I don't even know how old I was. I was probably about 8 years old, 9 years old, maybe 10. And I saw these comics, scrimped, put my pocket money together whenever I could, bought comics. Then, I used to just copy out of the books. I remember copying Jim Lee's things, or copying pictures of Lobo by Simon Bisley, and I just inspired the hell out of me. And then, went from there, did graphic design, went into advertising, because there wasn't really an outlet locally to do comics. And so I figured might as well do the next closest thing that actually pays my bills, and that was working advertising. And from advertising, I saw there was a bit of a gap where I could possibly do some illustration, do something on the side. So I remember one weekend seeing somebody brief in an illustration to an artist, and I thought, geez, well, maybe I could do that. And so just for myself, I did the illustration over the weekend and then showed up with it on the Monday, and that kind of started the whole illustration thing for me. So I left advertising after about 6 years or so, and then just went full-time commercial illustration. Still not being able to do comics, but drawing comics for myself. And it was a lot of fun, just getting to draw and do that for a living. Then, gosh, it was years and years later. I've been doing commercial illustration for quite a few years since then. And Cosmic Comics brought out comic book artists come do a signing, and I was there with my friend Sean, and we were like, well, we never get to see international comic book artists, so let's show our portfolios. And I was lucky enough that he liked my stuff and decided he would share it with his editor, Ben Abernathy, who was the head editor at Wildstorm at that point. And this was before it got folded in to DC Comics. And he said, oh, I'll share my stuff with Ben because I'm busy working on a thing with him. And I was like, cool. And then I forgot about it for like 6 months. I didn't hear anything. Thought that nothing was going to happen from that. But you miss all the shots you don't take. So I tried. But 6 months later, I got an email from Ben going, so we've got a project. I don't know if you want to help us out on that. And I love when editors do that, because we're like literally sitting here, and they always phrase it as though, could you help us out on this thing? It's like, it's our dream. We want to do this more than anything in the world. So I'm not helping you, you're helping me, but whatever. Sure, man, frame it however you like. And so I think I did a little, what was my first comic? It's actually difficult to remember. I think I did a short story for Human Target, like 6 pages or so, backup. And in the meantime, I worked on a project that still hasn't come out and probably won't, because it was with an artist who never finished his pages. So for about a year, I think I did 8 issues of a book that I did 15 pages, and then the other artist, who was a big name artist, I won't mention his name, just, I don't want to throw shade. He never got around to doing his pages because he was in such demand, and maybe wasn't particularly fast. So I did 8 issues, 15 pages each, and it's still sitting somewhere in DC's archives. And then DC kind of folded Wildstorm into themselves, and all the editors that I was working with went to DC. And so I got lucky enough to then just be given some jobs that way. I got some Batman work because the editors knew me and they liked what I did, and I did some Nightwing. It's actually difficult to remember. Batwoman, and then again, some of my editors who I was good friends with moved on to Marvel, so I ended up doing a few issues here and there for Marvel. Well, I guess our meeting is kind of funny because there was an art competition at Cosmic Comics that they were running where you had to draw Batman, and I think Sean likes to mention how he doesn't consider himself competitive, but he told me this like word for word is that I think they had mentioned me to him. And I mean, likewise, they'd mentioned his work to me because there's not that many people who want to draw comics in South Africa, and so I did a Batman just for fun, and Sean was like, "Oh, that's Jason's. I bet you I can do a better one than that." And so then he did a Batman piece, and he did full color, and he drew 3 different Batmans, and it was amazing. And I think he won. I can't even remember who won, but don't ever Sean tell you he's not competitive. But yeah, and. But I was always a fan of his work. I remember him. I think he thought that I was going to be a dick the first time we met, and so he should maybe tell that story because I think my literal first introduction was, "Hey, Sean, I love your work," and I think he thought I was just going to be a big douchebag, But it's not particularly funny. But that's how we met. There was a little mini convention held in the Heathway shopping centre, and he had its little table set up there, and I was like, "Oh, that's Sean. I recognise that work. That was that cool Batman he drew." And yeah, we introduced ourselves and went from there. And yeah, so I mean, they just recently announced the fact that Warren and Brian Hitch are getting back together to do an amazing Batman story, which, from what I've seen, looks incredible. But that was my first introduction to Warren's stuff, was stuff he did with Brian Hitch all those years ago on Authority. And so I also subscribed to his email list, and just this was a little bit after the Marvel stuff. And I'm a fan of writers because I think when it comes to comics, it's like story first always. Obviously, you don't have a comic without an artist, but it has to be the idea. It has to start with the idea and the story. So I mailed just out of the blue, like, "Hey Warren, I'm a big fan of your stuff. I don't know, could you mind if I send you some pages just so you can have a look and see if you see anything you like?" Mentioning that I had worked with DC and Marvel before. I don't recommend this, people. It's not good to harass creators online, but it worked for me. So, don't do as I do as I say. And so I get a 1-word reply back. It just goes, "Sure." So, all right. Man of many words, but is very succinct. So I sent him some stuff, and he was like, "Oh yeah, this is cool." And that was it. I didn't hear from him again. Then I did a commission for a friend. Somebody commissioned me to do a Transmetropolitan piece, and I shared it on Twitter and tagged him in, and he replied. I was like, "Oh, that's very cool. What are you working on now?" And so, being the cheeky, needy person that I am, I said, "Well, I'm hoping to still work with you." And he goes, "Well, drop me a mail. Let's talk." And so we started chatting, and it was a couple of weeks, and then didn't hear anything from him. And then he goes, "Well," mails me, "What do you think of James Bond?" And I was like, "Oh, I like James Bond. He's cool." Thinking, of course, the whole time that what he meant was, let's do a James Bond-esque sort of thing, because if anybody could take the idea of James Bond and then twist it into something new and interesting, it would be that man. And he replies with, "Cool, because we're relaunching James Bond with Dynamite." I was like, "Oh, what?" So I had no idea. It was like, the idea that I was going to get to work on actual James Bond, and yeah, that just kind of snowballed from there. I got to draw 12 issues with him. It was some of the most fun stories I've ever done. And yeah, so that allowed me to do really, really fun things in the books as well. Like, I really enjoy like very realistic fight choreography, and he had re-looked at James Bond and made him back into that blunt instrument. None of the really fancy gadgets, none of that stuff. He was just a guy who could, go in somewhere and get a job done. And so I really enjoyed the idea of like, this guy could fight. So I did a bit of research as well, and like, how does he fight? And from the books, like, James Bond was supposedly he did study judo and boxing. So whenever there was a fight, I tried my best to then incorporate particular moves or techniques that I'd read about or seen online or whatever, and use them in the books. Just to give it that sense of realism for me. Like, I don't think everybody would have seen it. Not everybody would understand what I was doing. And then also there were 1 or 2 times I was able to put in some I guess you would consider dirty fighting. That wasn't in the script, but Warren allowed me to do it just because I thought it seemed like something that James Bond would do. There's a scene where he's fighting one of the main bad guys, and he gets punched in the ribs, and instead of just blocking normally, he shoves his elbow down so that it breaks the guy's hand. And that wasn't in the script, but it just worked really well because the main villain in that story couldn't feel pain. So I felt it added a little bit to that. And I got to show like the broken bones in the hand because we did this, me and my colorist Guy Major did this almost like x-ray vision sort of thing to show like the damage that had happened, which was another thing. I didn't want the violence to be glorified in the books either. Somebody gets shot, it's gross, it's brutal, it's horrible. Let's show it as bad as it possibly can be. Like, what is the damage that happens when a bullet, especially the sorts of bullets that James Bond was using, what do they do to the human body? Like, if you get shot in the lung with a bullet that explodes into 8 different pieces, what's left of your organs? And so we did, we did a few things like that. It was fun. So this is the latest book I worked on. I didn't do the cover. I got to draw a issue of Avengers 21 with Jason Aaron, who I met quite a long time ago, actually. 2015, he came out to FanCon in Cape Town, and a lovely human being. We got to hang out and get drunk and do silly things. It was good times. But I hadn't done Marvel work for a while, and so when they contacted me and said, oh, well, do you want to do this? We need a fill-in issue between the 2 big arcs in Avengers, because I think War of the Realms had just finished, and I think they're starting a new one after this issue. I was like, oh, amazing, because it's, just really great character work, not a ton of action. I mean, I do like drawing the action, but a lot of really like fun character moments of, they've just finished their crazy big battle and now they're all hanging out in essentially the Avengers hot tub. It was almost as though the story was written for me. It was great fun. And comics is funny, like comics just brings people together. Like people I never would have became friends with in high school because they were reading The Flash or they were reading other comics they liked, and there wasn't that many people who were into comics, and it was all the different grades as well, or standards back in the day. People who were a couple of standards below me or above me, they were reading Batman or they were reading 2000 AD, and now we just had something to talk about because we just all liked comics.